hush fell over the quaint main street as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft rose and lavender. Isaac arrived in this small town with nothing but his camera, an overnight bag, and a soul heavy with longing. He needed an escape from the frenetic drum of the city, somewhere that breathed comfort and quiet, where he could rediscover the delicate art of looking inward. For years, he had tirelessly documented skyscrapers, neon signs, and crowds hustling across crosswalk. But the noise had drowned out his creativity, and his photographs, once vibrant, had grown hollow and flat. This town offered him a place to breathe. All he wanted was a momentary respite. On his first evening, he wandered down a narrow lane with low stone walls and an arch of trees overhead. He carried his camera in a worn leather case slung across his shoulder. He had no plans, no schedule. For once, there was no pressing assignment to complete or deadline to meet. He simply relished the thrill of wandering into the unknown. Purple wisterias trembled in the evening breeze, their petals speckling the path in pastel confetti. At the end of the lane stood a one-story building whose wide windows glowed faintly from within. He paused. Through the windows, he spotted silhouettes dancing to a soft, lilting melody, reminding him of ocean waves in slow motion. Curiosity nudged him forward. With hushed footsteps, he approached the door, inadvertently stepping on the single, creaky board of the porch. Inside, the small dance studio buzzed with subtle energy. A group of dancers moved in near perfect unison, their reflections shimmering in a mirrored wall. He hadn't expected to see dancing here, especially not at this late hour, but the graceful movements drew him in like a magnet. At the front of the room stood a lithe figure, arms lifted in a poised arc. Isaac could not shift his gaze from her. Her presence commanded the space with a fluid authority, graceful yet grounded. She was young, seemingly close to his own age, but wore a sense of poise he had rarely seen in others. As the music faded, the dancers sank into their final pose. The woman offered them a warm smile and turned to gather feedback from the onlookers. Isaac felt a sudden flutter in his chest. He pressed himself timidly against the door to avoid interrupting. He was no stranger to new environments. He had captured images all over the world, but there was something different, quieter, more intimate about this setting. The dancers dismissed themselves, chatting in hushed tones as they left. Now the woman stood alone at the mirrored wall, absently rotating her shoulders. As though loosening the day's tension, he steeled himself and gave a gentle knock on the door before stepping inside. The faint smell of lavender, likely from sachets stored in the dressing area, mingled with the scent of rosin on the floor. She glanced up, startled at first, then offered a polite smile. "I am sorry to interrupt," Isaac began, bowing his head a bit. "I was walking by and saw your group dancing. It was so lovely I couldn't help stopping." She didn't appear offended or suspicious. Instead, her eyes lit up with curiosity. "We just finished a rehearsal," she explained, motioning to the now empty studio. "You're welcome to have a look around, though it's really just four walls and a mirror." "The atmosphere is incredible," he blurted, stepping closer. "I'm a photographer from the city, and I'm in town for, well, to find some silence, I guess you could say." "Then you've come to the right place." She extended her hand, slender fingers warm against his palm. "My name's Ramona. I run this little dance school." "Isaac," he replied. "It's a pleasure." The hush in the air resonated with the gentle aura she exuded. Even her voice was soothing. Fresh from the intense hume of city life, Isaac felt a little like a trespasser in this peaceful environment, but Ramona's openness emboldened him. He let his focus roam across the polished floor, the old-fashioned record player in the corner, and the tall wooden bar running the length of the mirrored wall. "Do you teach often?" Isaac asked. "Every day except Sunday," Ramona answered. "Some classes are just kids, but tonight's was an adult group. We're preparing for a small show." He glimpsed a row of slippers lined up neatly against the wall, each pair unique in its wear and tear. "What kind of show?" An end of summer dance performance in the town square, she said, then smirked slightly. It's a big deal for us here, even though I suppose it wouldn't rival anything in a major city. Isaac shook his head gently. I've captured countless grand events, but they all became a blur. Something about this place seems more meaningful, more human. He felt an unexplainable urge to photograph the performance, to capture the honest passion in their movement. Ramona seemed to sense his enthusiasm. You should come watch our final practice tomorrow night. If you're still around, we might catch a few magical moments for your camera. He lifted his camera case with a small smile. I'd love to document it. Night settled on the town, the smell of pine drifting through Isaac's motel window. He tried to sleep, but his mind stayed fixed on the gentle tilt of Ramona's head, the arch of her torso, the sincerity in her eyes. He recalled the final freeze frame of the dancers, how their stillness seemed alive rather than static. He'd been searching for an emotional anchor for his graphics, something that felt real and full of soul. In one evening, he had glimpsed it. The next day, Isaac set out exploring. The small grocery store, the narrow bakery, and a modest library offered a subtle tapestry of daily life. Children scurried down sidewalks, greeting elders who sat on porches, sipping lemonade. The pace was languid, as though the town itself waltzed to an old tune from simpler times. Feeling nostalgic, Isaac brought his camera to his eye, capturing quiet details, a cat dozing in a window, laughter bubbling over a neat picket fence, laundry dancing on a clothesline bright with afternoon sunshine. Around early evening, he made his way back to Ramona's dance studio. Music and laughter spilled through the door again, though it was a different tune this time. Lighter and more playful. He slipped inside and raised his camera slowly, discreetly. Dancers performed in small groups, each telling a different story. He saw a couple gliding with overlapping arms, children skipping in circles, a trio practicing leaps that lingered midair in his shutter. Among them all, he kept returning to Ramona. She drifted with an organic elegance, an unspoken conversation between her limbs and the music. Each shift of her hips, each pointed toe, seemed to fill the space with something intangible, a sense of honest passion. He clicked photo after photo, trying to capture that essence. She caught sight of him and her gaze softened, but she did not break her flow. Instead, she offered him the subtle gift of a small grin, as if acknowledging that he, too, was part of the performance now. That smile flared something in Isaac's chest, a warmth like the tender notes of a violin. He realized he not only wanted to photograph her, he wanted to understand her. After the rehearsal, the group broke, giggling among themselves. Ramona walked over, cheeks flushed from exertion, but eyes alight. How did it go? Get some shots you like? Isaac pushed a stray curl of hair off his forehead. I think so, but I'd need to check them later. You all look beautiful and at ease. She laughed, chugging from a water bottle. We're a little rough around the edges, but passion makes up for many imperfections. Would you like to come see what we're planning for the show? We have a mock stage set up in the auditorium next door. He felt a surge of excitement. Absolutely, he said, following her as she led him through a side door into a small municipal auditorium. Rows of wooden seats faced a modest stage, lit by well-worn stage lights. Crepe paper decorations and earlier set pieces littered the corners, lending the space a playful atmosphere. Ramona stepped onto the stage, eyes filled with dreams of the upcoming performance. Close your eyes and imagine hundreds of townspeople sitting out there, she said, her voice echoing faintly. Children, grandparents, young couples on dates. This show is for them, reminding everyone to find a bit of beauty in everyday life. Isaac took a seat in the front row, opening his camera to review a few snapshots. He caught glimpses of Ramona mid-twirl, her white practice skirt swirling around her. Though the images were unedited, raw with motion blur, they radiated sincerity. She hopped down from the stage and approached him, peering over his shoulder. I'm always curious about how dancers appear in photos. We move so swiftly, it can be tricky to capture the emotion behind each pose. He angled the camera so she could see more. In one still, she held one arm high and the other low, creating a diagonal line with her body. Her face bore an expression of pure devotion. Ramona's brows lifted in surprise. Well, that's different from what I imagine I look like. Different how? Isaac asked quietly. She pursed her lip. I always feel like I'm dancing out of my own skin, if that makes sense. I lose track of my face, my shape, everything. Yet somehow your photo shows me wholly present, like my emotions found their way into each frame. Isaac felt a stirring in the pit of his stomach. Photography can capture more than easy shapes or lines. Sometimes it freezes a piece of someone's soul in the fraction of a second. A quiet hush hung between them for a moment. Then Ramona smiled again. You've made me sound more poetic than I am, she teased, though her voice trembled with sincerity. Listen, if you'd like, come by tomorrow. I can show you some of the dance moves if you're curious. Let you experience it from the inside. He blinked. Me? Dance? He let out a small laugh, hugging his camera self-consciously. I have 2 left feet, I promise. I hide behind the lens for a reason, she nodded. I used to say the same thing about public speaking, but maybe you just haven't met the right teacher. No pressure, though, she said with a playful wave of her hand. Just offering. A pleasant tingle spread through him. He liked the honesty in her invitation. No demands, no strings attached, just a chance to step out of his comfort zone. I'll think about it, he replied. Later that night, Isaac sat on a bench by the town's small lake, reviewing the day's photos on his lap. When he zoomed in on Ramona's expressions, he saw a story etched into her eyes, a yearning, a quiet determination. There was a sort of peace in her features, a sense of belonging he craved. Beyond capturing images, he wanted to know her, her life, her struggles, the secrets hidden behind her gracious smile. He heard soft footsteps behind him. When he turned, he found Ramona bundled in a light jacket. She smiled apologetically. Sorry, I didn't mean to sneak up on you. I like coming here to think sometimes. Isaac slid over to make room for her. No need to apologize. It's good to see you. The moon's reflection danced along the water, and the evening air was chilly. He was grateful for her company. Beautiful night, he said quietly, gesturing at the star-studded sky. She nodded. I'm used to nights like these. Whenever I feel overwhelmed, I come here to breathe. The lake never judges, never changes, just gentle water and silent starlight. He set his laptop aside. I get it. I've been feeling overwhelmed lately too. That's why I came. I needed some calm after feeling buried in the city. Ramona's gaze flicked over his face. You're searching for something, aren't you? She asked softly. I can see it in your eyes, that restless wonder. Isaac exhaled, grateful for her perceptiveness. Yes, and I'm not sure what it is. A spark in my work, a sense of peace, maybe just a new way to see the world. She wrapped her jacket tighter around her shoulders. Finding meaning can be as simple as letting your body speak sometimes, letting movement do the talking. Dancing taught me to trust myself, to believe my intuition, and it all started here in this town on nights like these. He had an image of Ramona dancing by starlight, the flicker of her silhouette against moonlit water. The thought stirred him unexpectedly. For the first time, he found himself open to trying her suggestion. Dancing wasn't about being perfect, it was about letting go. They shared a long silence, a comfortable one. Then she rubbed her arms, and he realized she was cold. Without thinking, he slipped off his light sweater and offered it to her. She accepted with a grateful nod, and for a moment their hands touched, sending a gentle spark through his skin. She looked up, eyes shining with moonlit reflections. Thank you, she whispered. Then she rose to leave. I'll see you tomorrow, whether you choose to dance or just watch. He nodded, and she turned away, her steps soft like the hush of a lullaby. He watched until she disappeared into the line of trees, feeling a subtle ache in his chest. He knew, come morning, he would accept her invitation. Morning brought a bright sun and a rustling breeze through the sycamores lining the road. Isaac prepared himself for what awaited him at Ramona's studio. Nerves flickered in his stomach. Original plans for a solitary retreat seemed to shift as he realized he was excited, truly excited, about dancing with her, or at least trying to. He told himself it would be just one lesson, but deep down he sensed it was more significant than that. Pulling open the studio doors, he found Ramona waiting, already dressed in comfortable attire. She flashed a quick grin. "I'm glad you came," she said, crossing the room to set up the music player. Isaac swallowed. "Me too, I think," he added with a comedic grimace. Ramona guided him gently, showing him the basic posture, how to align his core, how to place his hands. The music was slow, a soft trickle of piano notes that helped him locate a stillness he hadn't anticipated. Self-conscious at first, he stumbled. Before he could apologize, Ramona simply laughed it off and adjusted his stance, calm as a seasoned instructor. When he managed a few steps in time to the music, she rewarded him with a brilliant smile. "Don't fixate on each step," she said, pressing one hand lightly to his chest. "Listen to your heartbeat, to the rhythm. Let it guide your feet." Her words made sense in a way that transcended logic. He closed his eyes briefly and allowed himself to loosen. The gentle press of her hand guided him in an effortless circle. He felt the floor lightly slide beneath the soles of his shoes. Her presence lent him confidence. Soon, though he wouldn't call it graceful, he was moving with enough fluidity to feel the music in his body. When the song ended, Isaac found his heart pounding. But not purely from exertion. "That," he began, cheeks flushed. "That was something." A sparkle lit her eyes. "Yes, it was. You're a natural once you let go." He laughed in disbelief. "I highly doubt I'm a natural, but I appreciate your generosity." They took a break, sipping water as they stood near the large windows. A dusty sunbeam painted half her face in gold, and Isaac had the urge to lift his camera. "Wait, may I?" he asked, holding up his camera. She nodded, prompting him to seize that golden moment. As he pressed the shutter, she turned slightly, letting the light accentuate the shape of her cheek, the curve of her jaw. Through his viewfinder, he caught a raw vulnerability in her gaze. It reminded him of the intangible glow she carried in her dance. When he set the camera down, he realized he hadn't taken just one photo. He had clicked half a dozen in quick succession, greedy to preserve that unguarded expression. Ramona approached and tucked a stray coil of hair behind his ear. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Isaac," she said gently. The sound of his name on her lips resonated through his heart, a comforting note that seemed to draw him closer. Before he could respond, she tugged him back onto the dance floor. Another tune began, this one a light waltz that swelled with tenderness. Isaac moved hesitantly at first, but then his earlier nerves melted into the cadence. He let his hand settle respectfully along her waist, feeling the crisp cotton of her top. The closeness was intoxicating. They circled each other slowly, her skirts brushing the tops of his shoes, her breath occasionally warm against his cheek. Each step, each subtle shift drew them into a realm separate from time, as though the entire world had shrunk to this polished floor and the hush of notes drifting through the air. She guided him with small nods or gentle tugs, correcting a misstep with patience. The vulnerability of dancing with her felt strangely freeing. For once, he wasn't focusing on capturing the moment with his camera, but living it, heartbeat pulsing in time with hers. When the music faded, he found himself gazing at her with a mixture of wonder and gratitude. Their breathing was synchronized, shallow and quick. Her hair, slightly damp at her temples, framed her flushed face, their eyes locked in a silence that spoke volumes. He opened his mouth, uncertain of what he wanted to say, but the door swung open with a clatter. One of the other dancers peered in, ushered inside by a gust of late morning wind. She froze, gave a friendly wave, and said, "Hey, Ramona, so sorry to interrupt, but we need you to check the costumes in the back room. There's a missing piece for the children's outfits. Ramona let out a small laugh, stepping away. Of course. Be right there. She threw Isaac an apologetic glance as she slipped out, leaving him alone in the hush. The floor still glowed with the memory of her steps. That evening, when Isaac returned to his motel, everything felt different. His senses were heightened, his spirit lighter. He'd spent the remaining afternoon hours helping Ramona gather music records, photograph costume adjustments, and chat with the other dancers. Though he was neither an official part of their group nor a local, they welcomed him warmly. It reminded him of a family. Each person pitched in, each contributed to the performance's success. A knock at his door startled him as he organized his photos on the laptop. When he opened it, Ramona stood shyly in the corridor, carrying a small plate covered in foil. A neighbor sent treats for the dance team. I saved you a few, though I'm not sure what they're called. He lifted the foil, revealing small pastries dusted with sugar. An inviting buttery aroma wafted up. Thank you, he chuckled, motioning her inside. She took a seat at the rickety little table by the window, and he joined her. They sampled the pastries. They were delicious, soft, sweet, with a slight tang of lemon zest. Ramona gazed around the plain motel room. Not quite the grandeur you might be used to, she remarked, but there was no judgment in her voice. He shook his head. Luxury doesn't soothe the soul, he said, recollecting the countless nights he spent in polished city apartments, yet felt painfully alone. But here, I feel more at ease than I have in ages. Ramona traced a swirl on the tabletop with her finger, as if deciding how vulnerable to be. I've traveled, though never extensively. Some days I wonder if I'm missing out on something by staying here. But then, dancing in my hometown, teaching people I've known all my life, it gives me purpose. He thought of the travel he'd done, the exotic shoots, the glitz of foreign locales. Yet none of it had ever led him to this level of peace. Purpose is precious, he said, leaning forward, and you bring so much life into this place. I didn't expect to find a dance studio tucked away in such a small town, but more than that, I didn't expect to meet someone so in love with what they do. Her cheeks grew faintly pink, but she held his gaze. I'm glad you came here, Isaac. A wistful smile played on her lip. I've learned so much myself about new ways to see beauty. Sometimes I get lost in the routine, but looking through your camera's perspective, I can sense the magic in those daily motions again. His chest tightened at her words. He reached across the narrow table, placing his hand over hers. The sensation was electric, quiet but certain. She parted her lips, about to speak, but neither of them formed the words. Instead, they sat in that hushed glow of understanding until the outside night seemed to fade away. The next 2 days rushed by in a blur of final rehearsals, costume fittings, and small-town excitement leading up to the performance. Isaac helped with lighting and stage arrangement, snapping photos where he could. Ramona orchestrated everything with tireless grace. When a volunteer arrived late or a child dancer grew shy, she was right there, offering encouragement with steady kindness. On the eve of the show, Isaac found Ramona alone in the studio after hours, practicing a solo routine in near darkness. A single spotlight fell on her form, accentuating the crisp sweep of her leg, the trembling arch of her arms. He watched, transfixed from the doorway. Her face was poised, yet intensely vulnerable, and the music carried a haunting note. When the final chord died away, she stood breathless, arms lowered, gaze on the floor. Slowly, Isaac set his camera down and approached. That was breathtaking, he whispered, as if any normal volume would shatter the moment. She looked up, eyes shining with something unspoken. I'm dancing a short piece alone in the show, she explained quietly. It's my first solo in front of the entire town. I wanted it to be perfect. He shook his head. It already is perfect. Dance isn't about mechanical perfection. It's about heart. He took a slow step forward, his pulse thudding so loudly he thought it would echo against the walls. And your heart is all over that stage. She inhaled softly, eyes glimmering. For an instant, he wondered if the movement that followed was initiated by her or him, but all he knew was that they stepped closer simultaneously. Their bodies brushed, and then her arms rested on his shoulders. His hands found her waist. They stood in silence, a hush that lasted mere seconds but felt eternal. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home after a long journey. She leaned into him, lips trembling with both yearning and relief. The entire room seemed to exhale, the tension of days giving way to the softness of that moment. Isaac poured into that kiss everything he'd held tight and everything he'd discovered in her presence. She tasted of hope, of possibility. When they pulled apart, still pressed close, Ramona let out a shaky laugh. "We might have found more than just calm and creativity here," she whispered, brushing her fingertips along his jaw. He pressed his forehead to hers. "Yes," he answered, his own breath uneven. "I've always been searching for something through my lens, but you helped me see it more clearly." Her lips curved into a smile. "You've captured my dance, but now you've also captured my heart." Performance night arrived like a festival, the town square brimming with families, friends, and curious onlookers. String lights crisscrossed overhead, and a temporary stage, bedecked in colorful ribbons, shone under spotlights. Isaac stood on the side, camera in hand, heart hammering with excitement. Ramona had taught and rehearsed for weeks, and this was her moment. The group performances went smoothly, each set of dancers receiving applause and cheers, laughter, warm chatter, and the scent of kettle corn floated in the air. Parents waved from the crowd. One child stumbled mid routine and grinned sheepishly, spurring appreciative laughter. Isaac took shots of bright costumes, fleeting smiles, the swirl of skirts beneath the lights. At last, the stage was cleared for Ramona's solo. A hush cascaded over the audience. The music began, gentle and melancholic. She stepped onto the stage as though stepping into another world, eyes half closed. The hush deepened as she glided in a seamless marriage of grace and tenderness. Her arms carved lines through the air, her legs extended with liquid artistry. The crowd sat spellbound. Isaac raised his camera, capturing each wave of emotion that crossed her features. Behind the lens between them, he felt intimately connected to her. When the final note died, she froze mid-pose, spotlight catching the faint glimmer of tears on her lashes. Silence held for a heartbeat, then a roaring ovation erupted. Ramona straightened, cheeks glowing. She gave a small bow, tearful but radiant, as she walked off the stage. Isaac saw relief wash through her. She spotted him, a silent question in her eyes. He set his camera aside, letting it dangle from its strap, and pulled her into a tight embrace. "Flawless," he whispered against her hair. "Absolutely flawless." She clung to him for a moment, and the noise of the crowd faded into the background. "Thank you," she murmured. I think we did it." Overcome with emotion, Isaac held her hand, leading her around to greet the rest of the dancers. Eventually, the night's applause gave way to quieter celebrations. People drifted home, exchanging warm farewells. A soft breeze blew confetti across the stage, the hush returning with the lateness of the hour. Under the moonlit arch of the abandoned square, Isaac and Ramona stood. The final volunteers were gathering seats, shutting off stage lights, but the two of them lingered. He toyed with the thought of returning to the city, obligations pulling him back to the articles and deadline, but another, stronger yearning tugged at him. He met her gaze. "Ramona," he said softly, tangling his fingers in hers. "I came here looking for a break from the chaos. What I found is, I found you, and I don't want to lose that." The reflection of the moon in her eyes seemed to shimmer. She stepped closer, her voice gentle yet certain. "So don't leave," she said simply. "Stay until you're ready. Dwell in this moment. We can figure out the rest together." His heart thundered. He lifted a hand to cradle her cheek. "That's all I want," he replied. The city waited, somewhere on the horizon, but inside him he felt a new world unfolding, painted in the soft brush strokes of her dance, shimmering with the light that glowed in her eyes. For once, his restless spirit stilled, realizing this simple truth: sometimes you have to slow down to meet destiny. She raised her face to his, and their lips met in a tender promise. The summer night held them in a warm embrace as they savored the sweetness of that quiet revelation. Behind them, the small stage stood empty, marked with footprints of dancers and confetti fragments. In front of them, life opened up with the gentle invitation of a blank canvas. And Isaac knew, with unshakable certainty, that everything he needed was right here, in this town, in this moment, in the graceful arms of a dancer who had taught him to love beauty for its own sake, and in so doing, helped him find his own.